The room was full of people who had never once worried about where their next meal was coming from. And I sat near the back of the ballroom, watching my son-in-law's mother, prepare to use me as the centerpiece of her evening. She stood at the front of the room beside a 10-foot banner that read Meridian Heights, the future of Ashavels. Her hair was silver and styled to perfection. Her gown was ivory and tailored. She held her champagne flute the way royalty holds a scepter. Like the weight of it was meant to remind you that she was accustomed to things of value. I had known this moment was coming for 6 weeks. I had prepared for it the way my husband used to prepare for difficult inspections, systematically, without emotion, checking every measurement twice. My name is Leonora Wheel. People who know me call me Leo. I spent 30 years as a licensed architect in Western North Carolina. The kind who builds schools and community centers and affordable housing complexes. The kind who checks her work before signing off because somewhere out there a child is going to sleep inside that building and trust that the walls will hold. The woman at the front of the room understood the opposite of that. She was the founder and CEO of Meridian Properties, 64 years old, and she had spent 3 decades building the kind of empire that looks impressive from the outside and costs other people dearly when it falls. I knew that better than anyone. 25 years ago, her company killed my husband. She tapped her glass. The room fell quiet. "I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight," she said, her voice low and practiced, the voice of someone who had given 100 speeches and never once meant a word. "This building represents everything Meridian stands for: strength, ambition, legacy." I kept my hands flat on the tablecloth, steady. Her eyes swept the room, paused at my table for exactly 2 seconds. I counted. "My son has brought something extraordinary into this family," she continued. "A wife who has risen above considerable hardship, a woman of real determination." She smiled at my daughter, who sat 3 tables away, her back very straight, her face very still. "We are so proud to call her one of us now." A pause, another look at me. Of course, becoming part of a family like ours requires a certain resilience. The kind you develop when you've spent your life making do with less, when no one was there to provide the foundation that every child deserves. She lifted her glass. "To my daughter-in-law, who built herself in spite of everything." The room applauded. A few guests laughed softly, the way people laugh when they aren't sure whether to be uncomfortable. I stood up. The scrape of my chair was barely audible, but every head turned. "That was a beautiful speech," I said, and I did not raise my voice. I never had to. 30 years of presenting to city councils and zoning boards had taught me that the quieter you spoke, the harder people listened. But I think, before we drink to the future, we should all understand what Meridian Properties actually built and what it cost. I reached into my jacket pocket. My fingers found the compass, cool metal, worn smooth at the edges, the engraving almost invisible now from years of touch. I didn't take it out, not yet. My son-in-law's mother's champagne glass lowered by 2 inches. Her smile did not move, but her eyes did. Good. The man I married was named Arthur. He was a structural engineer, the kind who quoted load tables, the way other men quoted baseball statistics, and who cried at every movie that featured a dog. He kept a small silver compass in his shirt pocket on every job site. His grandfather had given it to him. True north, he would say, holding it up when a crew member tried to cut a corner he wouldn't allow. If you always know which direction is right, you'll never get lost. He died 25 years ago in the collapse of a parking structure on Meridian Properties' Haverlock Point development. He was 39 years old. Our daughter was 4 months old. The official report called it a seismic event, an act of nature. These things happen in construction. I was an architect. I had spent years reading structural assessments. I knew what properly reinforced concrete could withstand, what properly sourced rebar could hold. I I also knew what grade standard substitutions could do to a load-bearing column when the wrong weight bore down at the wrong angle. 3 days after the funeral, I walked into Meridian Properties' regional office and asked to see the project file for Haverlock Point. The woman at the desk told me the files were proprietary. I sat down in their lobby and told her I would wait as long as it took. She called security after 45 minutes. On my way out, I passed the copy room. The door was open. A folder labeled Haverlock PT, Constructural Revisions, sat on the edge of a table. I was alone in that hallway for 11 seconds. I took the top 3 pages. That night, sitting at the kitchen table with my daughter asleep in the next room, I read the words that confirmed what I had already known. Substitution of Type 2 rebar for Type 3 in vertical columns B7 through B12. Cost savings, $280,000. Approved by G. Hartfield, VP of Development. I folded the papers and put them in the back of Arthur's drafting drawer, beneath the compass. Then I made a promise to him, and to the daughter asleep in the next room, and I kept it for 25 years. The first years alone were survival, and nothing more. My daughter cried at 2 in the morning and I rocked her in the dark, one hand on her back, the other holding a blueprint I was supposed to have finished reviewing by dawn. My neighbor Yvette watched her during the day while I drove to job sites. I'd pick my daughter up after dark and hold her longer than I probably needed to, just to feel her breathing. When she was 7, she asked about her father. We were at the kitchen table, a school project spread between us. What was Daddy like? I got up and went to his drafting drawer. I brought back the compass, set it in front of her. He built things, I said. Good things, things that held. She picked it up, turned it over in her small hands. True North, she read. He used to say that if you always knew which direction was right, you'd never get lost. She set it down carefully, like it was something that needed to be treated gently. Did he know where right was? Every time, I said. She kept the compass on her nightstand after that. The years moved the way years do, when you're working too hard to count them. My daughter grew into someone who scared and astonished me in equal parts. Dean's List every semester, captain of the debate team, accepted to NC State's engineering program on a scholarship that had her name on it because she'd earned it, no one else. When she walked across that stage to collect her civil engineering degree, I sat in the bleachers and cried in a way I hadn't let myself cry since the week Arthur died. After the ceremony, she gave me a small gift box. Inside was a photograph she'd had framed. Arthur in his hard hat, compass in his shirt pocket, grinning at the camera on some long Ego job site. I want to build things like he did, she said, like you did. I held it and could not speak for a while. 6 months ago, she called me from a job site in Raleigh. I could hear wind and machinery in the background. Mom, she said, I met someone. Something in her voice made me set down the coffee I was holding. She told me his name was Felix, that they'd met 3 months ago at a conference in Charlotte, that he was smart and kind and actually read structural assessments for pleasure, so obviously they were perfect for each other. She laughed when she said it, and the laugh sounded so much like Arthur's that my chest tightened. He works in sustainable development, she said. He's been trying to change things from inside his family's company. Reform it. He's different from all of them, Mom. His family's company, I said. His mother runs it, Meridian Properties. She said it the way you say a name when you expect the other person to be impressed. The coffee mug handle went cold under my fingers. Meridian. Mom, you still there? I'm here. I really think this is it. I told her I was happy for her. I told her I couldn't wait to meet him. Then I sat in my kitchen for 2 hours staring at Arthur's photograph on the wall before I opened my laptop. His LinkedIn profile loaded in seconds. 32 years old. Sustainable Development Consultant at Meridian Properties, Asheville office. I scrolled to a charity event photo. Mother and son in formal wear, her hand on his shoulder, the same Blue Ridge peaks in the background that you could see from Haverlock Point. I picked up Arthur's compass from the windowsill. True north. The permit filings for Meridian Heights were public record. I pulled them all. Cross-referenced the structural specs against current code. It took 3 days to find what I was looking for, and took 2 more to convince myself I wasn't seeing it because I wanted to. The same substitution, different project, different decade, same choice. Rebar grades below required specifications in 4 of the 12 vertical load columns. Estimated savings listed in an internal cost analysis I accessed through Yvette, who still worked in Asheville's permit office and who had been Arthur's friend, too. When I called her and said I needed to see something, she didn't ask why. She sat across from me at her kitchen table and looked at what I'd spread out. "Leo," she said quietly, "this building opens in 6 weeks." "I know." "And we're standing in it tonight," she said, meaning at the gala I had already been invited to as the mother of my son-in-law's fiancé. She looked at me steadily. "What do you need?" I needed a journalist. I found one, a woman named Carries, who covered building safety for the Asheville Citizen-Times, and who listened to me across a diner table without interrupting for 45 minutes before she set down her pen and said she needed an inside source. "I might be able to get you one," I said. What I didn't know was that the source was going to come to me first. 3 weeks before the gala, my daughter sat down at my kitchen table with her laptop and a look I recognized from her childhood. Something was wrong, and she was calculating how to say it. She turned the screen toward me. A building permit for Meridian Heights, Phase 2. Structural safety approvals. Her name in the signature field. Licensed professional engineer. "I didn't sign this," she said. I looked at it, looked at her. "There are 14 of them," she said. "Felix asked me to help him audit some of his mother's project files. I found these yesterday." She closed the laptop. I don't know what to do. I wanted to tell her then, about Haverlock Point, about the 3 pages in the drawer, about 25 years of keeping a promise I'd made to a man she knew only from photographs and a borrowed compass. But the way she was looking at me, frightened rather than angry, told me she wasn't ready. If I pushed too hard without enough evidence in hand, she might warn Felix. Felix might warn his mother. I reached across and took her hand. I told her not to confront anyone yet, that we would figure it out together. I chose wrong, I know that now. 2 weeks later, my son-in-law's mother invited my daughter to lunch. I found out what happened at that lunch 3 weeks after the gala, sitting with my daughter in a hotel room, while she was still in the dress she'd worn to the event, and her hands would not stop shaking. This is what she told me. A private room downtown. My son-in-law's mother already seated when my daughter arrived. A folder on the table, pushed across without preamble. 14 forged permits, bearing my daughter's signature. An email chain showing payments from a Meridian offshore account to a holding company in my daughter's name. Consulting fees for structural approvals she had never seen, never reviewed, never been paid for. My daughter told her she hadn't signed anything. Her mother-in-law told her to prove it. Then, in the calm tone of someone who had done this before, she explained what would happen if my investigation went any further. My daughter's engineering license would be flagged. The forged documents would go to the state licensing board. The offshore payments would look like bribes she'd accepted for approving work she knew was deficient. Everything she'd built over 8 years of schooling and early career would be dismantled before it truly stood. All my daughter had to do was come to the gala, stand beside Felix, smile. If I said anything, if I made a single move, she was to stay quiet, let her mother-in-law handle it. She said if I walked out of that lunch and called you, my daughter told me, not looking up from the floor of the hotel room, she'd have the documents filed with the licensing board before I reached my car. I listened without speaking. I thought if I did what she wanted, she'd leave you alone. I thought one evening of keeping quiet was better than watching her take my career and my license and everything I'd worked for." Her voice broke. "Mom, I thought I was protecting you." I understood. I also understood, sitting in that room, that silence was exactly what Meridian Properties had always counted on. It was what they'd counted on 25 years ago when the official report called a preventable death an act of nature, and I was a grieving widow with a 4-month-old baby and no idea how to fight a corporation. But I hadn't known any of this on the morning my son-in-law arrived at my office. 12 days before the gala, 7 in the evening. I hadn't left yet. He knocked twice and stood in the doorway with his jacket over his arm and a USB drive in his hand and the particular look of a man who hasn't slept in 3 days. He set the drive on my desk. He sat down in the chair across from me and told me he'd been gathering what was on it for 4 months. Internal emails. Cost analysis spreadsheets. The original structural specifications versus the substituted ones for Meridian Heights. Financial transfers between Meridian's main account and the LLC his mother used to obscure responsibility when projects went wrong. He had also brought older files from Haverlock Point. I had to set down my pen when he said the name. "I found them in her private archive last year," he said. "When I realized what they were, I kept copies. I didn't know about your husband until she told me." He paused. "I'm sorry, for all of it." I studied him the way I had studied blueprints for 30 years, looking for the places where the stated load didn't match the actual structure. What I found was a man who was ashamed and trying to stop being complicit. "Why now?" I said. "Because she's built an insurance policy out of my wife's name," he said, "and I won't allow it." I picked up my phone and called Carrie's. The morning of the gala, I drove to the cemetery. The November sky was old pewter gray. The grass was dry. I stood at Arthur's headstone for a long time and didn't say anything useful at first, just stood there the way you stand at a door you've been working up to for a very long time. "Tonight," I finally said. The wind moved through the dry oaks. I took the compass out of my pocket, held it in both hands. The engraving had almost disappeared from 25 years of fingers tracing it, but I would always know the words. "She used our daughter the same way she used everything else," I said. "Spent it to protect herself and called it good business." I pressed my fingers to the cold stone and got back in my car. The gala was everything Meridian Properties wanted it to be. 250 guests, city council members, investors, a representative from the governor's infrastructure office. The lobby of Meridian Heights had been dressed with borrowed chandeliers and white orchid centerpieces and servers in black tie. Carrie's was there with press credentials. Yvette had positioned herself near the projection equipment the event team had set up for the building's feature presentation. I sat near the back. My daughter and my son-in-law were at the family table near the front. My daughter's back was very straight. She did not look at me. My son-in-law's mother took the podium at 8:15. She spoke about vision, about legacy, about what it meant to build something that would outlast you. Then her gaze found me, and her voice shifted just enough. "Family matters to us at Meridian," she said. "We've been fortunate to welcome remarkable people into our circle. Women who have overcome difficult circumstances, raised children alone, made do without the resources that others take for granted." She smiled warmly at the room. "That resilience deserves recognition, even if it comes a bit late." Polite laughter. A chair scraped somewhere to my left. "To my daughter-in-law," she said, raising her glass, "and to the family that can now give her what she was denied." I stood up. Every head turned. "Thank you," I said, and my voice was even and clear. "Meridian does know a great deal about what gets denied." I nodded once toward the back of the room. Behind the podium, the presentation screen came to life. The first slide was a structural assessment, the specified rebar grade in red, the substituted grade in yellow, the date, the initials at the bottom, GH. Grade 3 rebar in columns designed for grade 4, I said. In Meridian Heights, the building we are all standing inside at this moment. I let that sit for 3 seconds. The same substitution Meridian Properties made at Haverlock Point 25 years ago. A sound moved through the room, 250 people, drawing breath at the same moment. 14 building permits bearing my daughter's forged signature, offshore transfers attached to her name. An insurance policy, in case anyone came asking difficult questions about why this building may not stand as long as tonight's champagne suggests. The screen changed. Haverlock Point. Photographs from the original project, from the collapse, and then the cost analysis, the approval signature, the dollar amount saved, the date. My husband died in that building, I said. His name was Arthur Wheel. He was 39 years old, and he was a structural engineer who believed the most important thing you could build was something honest, something that told the truth about what it could hold. The room was completely still. I could hear the champagne fizzing in glasses no one was drinking from. Meridian Properties saved $280,000 the day. They decided his life was worth less than the cost of proper rebar. My son-in-law stood up from the family table. He placed both hands flat on the white linen. He looked at his mother, and then he looked at the room. I provided the documentation, he said, his voice steady. Every file you're seeing, I've already sent copies to the North Carolina Department of Insurance and the U.S. Attorney's Office. My son-in-law's mother stepped back from the podium. The porcelain composure was gone. What was underneath it was cold and very old and afraid. This is fabricated, she said. This is a personal campaign by a bitter woman who cannot let go of. With what resources, exactly? Carrie's voice came from the press section. The $14 million in assets that were frozen this morning. 2 men in dark suits were already moving from the far side of the room. They had not come for the catering. I watched them walk my son-in-law's mother toward the exit. I watched it the way I had imagined it for 25 years, and it felt less like victory than I'd expected. It felt like something closing. A door that had been stuck open so long you had stopped believing the house could be any other way. My daughter found me in the lobby 20 minutes later. Her dress was wrong for crying in, and she was crying anyway. She took hold of my arm and told me everything. The lunch, the threats, the 14 permits, the bargain she'd made in a private room downtown because she had believed that silence could be a form of protection. When she finished, I took both her hands in mine. It didn't protect me, I said. It never does. I know. She pressed her forehead to mine the way she'd done when she was small. I know, Mom, I'm sorry. I held her, not because everything was forgiven or because everything was fine. Because she was my daughter, and she had been terrified, and I had once been terrified too. And I had chosen silence for 25 years before I chose to stand up. We had both gotten it wrong in our different ways, and we were both still standing, which was something. We were not repaired overnight. We were broken in some of the same places and differently shaped in the ones that had healed wrong. It took 8 months before something between us felt like solid ground. 8 months of Sunday phone calls and careful conversations, and one afternoon when she came to see me, and we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd taught her to read blueprints, and neither of us said anything for a long time, and that was all right. The baby was born in the spring, a boy. They named him Arthur. Yvette called me from the hospital waiting room, her voice so full of happiness I had to sit down. She said my daughter had asked her to call. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried until my back ached, and then I made tea and cried a little more. My son-in-law came to my house that weekend. He stood at the door and held out his hand. In his palm was the compass. I had pressed it into his hand the night of the gala, in the chaos of the lobby. In the chaos of the lobby, because he had stood up in that room when he didn't have to, because he had chosen truth when everything he'd been raised inside was designed to reward silence. It had seemed right in that moment to give him something that had belonged to a man who understood what it cost to always know which direction was right. "She asked me to bring it back," my son-in-law said. "She wants Arthur to have it when he's old enough to carry it." I looked at this young man in my doorway, his father's build, his own gentleness underneath it, the particular tiredness of someone who had spent months doing the right thing and was still learning what that felt like when the dust settled. "Keep it safe until then," I said. He nodded. He handed it to me first, though, for just a moment, and I held it in both hands the way I had that morning in the cemetery. The engraving worn smooth, the needle still pointing where it always had. 6 weeks later, on a morning in early June, when the mountains were green and the air smelled like rain that hadn't come yet, my daughter brought the baby to see me. She set him in my arms on the front porch and stepped back, and I looked down at a boy with his great-grandfather's name and his grandmother's chin and eyes the color of old walnut wood. "Hi," I managed. He looked at me with the complete seriousness of a baby who has not yet decided what to make of the world. "I've been waiting a long time to meet you," I told him. My daughter sat down in the chair beside me. For a while, neither of us spoke. The mountains were blue and still in the distance, the same mountains that had been there when Arthur worked in their shadow, the same mountains that would be there when this boy was old enough to ask about the grandfather, whose name he carried. "I want him to know the whole story," my daughter said. "All of it, not just the parts where we got things right." "Good," I said. "I want him to know you kept going, after everything." I looked down at the baby, who had closed his eyes against the morning light. "I kept going because of you," I said. She reached over and took my hand. "People call what I did at that Gala revenge. They say the word like, it's a blade you sharpen in the dark and drive home when no one is looking. But what I spent 25 years building wasn't a weapon. It was a record, documentation, proof that what happened to Arthur was not an act of nature but a choice, and that choices have weight, and weight, eventually, finds its level. Arthur believed the most important thing you could build was something honest. A structure that didn't hide its load behind beautiful finishes and a hope that nobody looked too closely. He believed you owed that to every person who would ever live or work inside the thing you built. He carried that belief in his shirt pocket every day until the day he didn't come home. The compass is with my son-in-law now, waiting for the boy on my porch to be old enough to hold it without dropping it. When that day comes, I'll sit down with him and tell him what it says. 2 words his great-grandfather chose to carry with him onto every job site, every morning, his whole life. True north. You always know which direction is right, even when it costs you, especially then.